Brian Murphy with WRAL, joined by Bryn Renner, former UNC quarterback, NFL quarterback, college coach, and Bryn, we're talking after UNC crushed, shellacked, whatever terminology you want to use, by Clemson, 38-10. And this was a game, first play from scrimmage, Clemson scores a 75-yard touchdown, and whatever air was left in the balloon just totally went out. You called the game on the Tar Heel Sports Radio Network. What did you see? What are you seeing from the booth as a former player, as a former coach, that really caught your eye?
Yeah, it's a multitude of things, Brian. It's we're getting out coached, we're getting outplayed. There's no physicality from the offensive side or the defensive side. And I think there's a list of things that you can see, and this is coming from a guy who's played and coached, and the average fan can see that there's something going on that we're missing, because coming off a bye week, both teams had a bye week, and clearly Clemson had their hair on fire to make a statement, and they were 1-3, and Carolina's 2-2. However, we got those wins. We're still in a good situation, plus the first game of the ACC, and you just see a lack of motivation on the sideline. You see a lack of sense of urgency from coaches and players, and it started from the first play. And we were just talking about this, Brian. Obviously, Clemson saw something on game tape and took it to a different level, and had the double pass first play, and it goes for 70. You have countless missed tackles and can't push a guy out of bounds, and he scores. The Randall kid from Clemson looked really, really good, and we made him look like an All-American. I mean, Cade Klubnik was 22 out of 24. It was really kind of something that going into the game, Brian, I had hopes that things were going to change, but you haven't seen any improvement. And to have a bye week and to actually go backwards, it's kind of concerning. So, but look, I think there's different things that are going on that need to be taken care of, and really from the game management standpoint as well. I think there's different things we can do offensively to try to get more points on the board. So I think that's kind of where everyone's pointing the finger at right now.
You talked last week about, the people in the locker room, or maybe 2 weeks ago before the bye, that the people in the locker room need to take ownership. And by that, you meant the players. When you see what's happening on the sidelines, is there a sense that that's not happening? And I'm not absolving the coaches. We'll get to them, but it just felt like from the player standpoint, it wasn't there either.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of guys looking around and seeing who's going to lead. And when you create a roster with 70 guys that coming from all different areas, and you really haven't had time to mesh and gel, it's hard to hold somebody accountable that you don't know. And I think that's the biggest thing. And you look at a guy like Max Johnson. I loved how Max played. Now, was it perfect? No, but he stood in the pocket, took hits, and was trying to lead. And there's not many guys that are doing that from when you look at the sideline standpoint. Because, Brian, I'm going to be honest with you, and I think all my teammates would say the same thing. At a certain point, the players have to go and make plays, and they're accountable for what happens on the field. The coaches can't go play. So I think from my point of view, I want to see more emotion and say, this is not acceptable. We have a certain type of pride. And look, that product on the field, that scoreboard is all that matters. And the fans in the stands deserve your best. And I just don't think it's there. And I think if I was the quarterback, I would be all over everybody 24/7, that this is not acceptable. This is not what we want. And it's happened to me before. We've gone on losing streaks. We've lost 2 in a row. We went through coaching turmoil. So I've been there and been in the locker room, and something's got to change, because when you look at the sideline, everyone's looking around to not point the finger, but looking for somebody else to make a play. Well, it's not happening. So there's a lot of things in the locker room that you can fix, but I think it comes down to there's not a lot of confident players on that roster right now, because they haven't made plays. And you look at a kid like Benjamin Hall, that was his first touchdown ever, and it was late in the fourth quarter. And I was just thinking, I was sitting there and I'm calling the game, and I'm like, wow, that kid's elated because it's his first touchdown. Well, we didn't know that going in, that he hasn't had many carries and things like that. So there was a lack of experience with all these 70 players, and there needs to be somebody that can step up, but nobody's making enough plays to go lead. So if you're not making plays, it's really hard to lead.
One thing I noticed is that a lot of the guys who aren't going to play are not on the sidelines. You watch college football all around the country, and I want, Alabama's on every week. There's tons of guys in jeans and their jersey really part of the team, celebrating, getting the crowd excited, standing on the bleachers, they're not going to play, clearly by the way they're dressed, but they're on the sidelines. Is that something you've noticed, that those players aren't on the sidelines, and you've lost however many guys who could be hyping guys up, getting excited, and feeling like part of the program?
Sure, yeah, that's the first time I've ever seen it in college football, Brian. Now in the NFL, and like I said, I was there for 6 years, and I was more of a practice squad player. But I always dressed and always had an earpiece in. And I was taking stats, or I was involved in the conversation, so I could get better in case I did have to go play. But there are certain NFL teams that don't dress you and put you up in a suite in the box, and you're still on the practice squad. So I've had experience with both, and this is the first time, Brian, I've seen kids in sweatsuits that practiced all week and deserved probably to dress out so their parents can see them and take pictures. And I think that's part of college football. And I'm not telling anyone how to do their job, but I've never seen kids stand for 4 quarters and their legs are cramping, and you see them kind of like they're almost bending down, because if you stand for 4 quarters, Brian, if me and you did, my legs are gonna be hurting. And that's what I was looking down there and seeing, and I've never seen that. And I think part of the tradition and part of college sports is you are involved with the team at a high level, and game days are special, and you don't know how many you're going to get. And sometimes these kids are only to put on a Carolina uniform will be that Saturday, and you got to think about that. And I've never seen it. I think it's really good for morale. Like I said, one of my good buddies, Caleb Presley, dressed out for every single game, and he's doing great in his profession now. He's killing it, but he was never going to play. But he was great for my mood. Like, he was the leader of morale when I was here. And I took that because I needed some extra boost. I needed him to, hey, Bryn, you're doing all right. And there's things that your teammates and friends can do as far as an encouragement standpoint, because college football is 18 to 22-year-old kids that are high emotional, high volatility, right? You fumble. Okay, no one's going to talk to me. You score a touchdown. I'm the man, but that's a 4-quarter game. So those guys can provide something from an emotional standpoint. And I just have never seen it in college football. Like I said, I've seen guys with sweatsuits on, but will allowed to be in the box and talk to your players. But that's just something that Coach Belichick and the staff feel strongly about. So, but that aside, you have to develop some sort of energy on the bench for sure.
Yeah, Caleb Presley doing just fine these days.
He's killing it.
Yeah.
He's killing it.
I want to talk, obviously, a lot of talk about the NFL 33rd team thing, and I know, and I think most of us know, that they didn't mean they were going to be as good as an NFL team, but they were going to run things like an NFL team, and we saw that with the inactives. I would pitch it from this way: in the NFL, somebody would get demoted or fired this week on the coaching staff. We saw it at Oregon State. They just relieved their play caller of duties. That's not an NFL team, obviously. UCLA, but we've seen a lot of firings this year. It just feels like, coming off a bye week, going into a bye week, having a performance like that, something would change. I asked Belichick about it after the game and said, "Do you think you need to shuffle?" He basically said, "We're not doing things fundamentally wrong. We just need to do them better," and didn't get the sense that anything was going to change with the coaching staff. You've been a part of it. Walk me through what you think would happen in an NFL locker room right now, and what maybe you see at a college level.
Yeah, I think starting with the NFL, I think that is a business, and college football is turning into a business. So then, Brian, the first thing that comes to my mind is, look at UCLA. They were 0-4. They make one change at the coordinator position, fire the head coach, fire the offense coordinator, fire the DC. They fired a lot of people, made some changes. They go out and score 42 points at home and win and look like a totally different team. Sometimes that's what it takes. I'm not – look, I was a coach and a player. I've gotten cut. I've gotten fired at FIU, and I've gotten cut 6 times. So I think I'm at a liberty that it sucks when changes have to be made, but you sign up for that when you start playing football at a young age. I've been bench, cut, and booed, and all the above. So I think I have the liberty to say this, that changes need to be made. And sometimes when you're not performing, it's time to really reflect and make a change and go a different direction. Because I just think about, when Butch Davis was here in 2000, and I think 7 and 8 were his first seasons, maybe just 8. And then I came in 2009, there was incrementally 4 wins, 8 wins. And it was competition, right? until we could get to that point where we're beating the Clemsons, we're beating the Florida States, we're beating the Miamis. And I think that's all the fans want to see. We haven't seen that, Brian. We've actually saw, we've digressed. And I think that's the one thing that, to your point, changes need to be made. I don't know if it's now. I don't know when that is. I don't have that pulse. I'm not in the building. So, but if in the NFL, yeah, changes would have been made and strongly enforced. And because you got to go win, because it's the nature of the business is to win.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Virginia Tech fire their coach. They came in Raleigh and were able to beat NC State. Sometimes you just change the energy a little bit. And I understand the staff has only been together for 5 games, and obviously it was a hand-picked staff, so there's a lot of ups and downs. Look, I don't, not to be Pollyannish. Is there anything going forward? There's another bye week. UNC plays at Cal on next Friday night. Then the schedule, which most people pointed to, is very, very soft. Some of those teams are playing much better. Wake Forest,
Yeah.
a first-year coach, brought in a lot of transfers. Some of the same things we see at Carolina. Looks to be playing really good. They went up to Virginia Tech and beat them. They were a play or two away from beating Georgia Tech, maybe a bit missed call away from beating Georgia Tech. Like, that's a program where I think you're seeing improvement in a first-year coach. Cal has looked good at times. Duke has looked very good over the last 3 games. NC State always gives UNC problems. Like, I'm looking at the schedule and I'm saying, where are the wins going to come from? Like, bowl eligibility is like 6 wins is the bare minimum. And you look at that schedule and all of a sudden bowl eligibility is going to be an uphill battle.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think every game has to be treated extremely, extremely important going forward. And I just, having one game in 27 games also, or 27 days also concerns you. And I've never seen that. And for a team that needs to get reps and to try to formulate those at a practice, you just can't, because you can't tackle to the ground. It's just, you got to keep everybody healthy, especially for they're about to play 7 games straight and not have a bye week. So I agree with you. I think, where do those wins come from? I have no clue, Brian, and I wish I had answers, because I thought watching the Clemson game, it was very, very, it's probably the most frustrated I've ever been in Kenan Stadium, because there was just no life. There was no competition, basically from the first play. So I don't know. I hope they can find answers in the bye week. I think something has to drastically change. I think from a mentality standpoint, from X's and O's, from watching film, you need a whole reboot. And because, like you said, you have to go to Cal on a Friday night, and that's difficult travel. So you lose a day of prep, and you got to go to the West Coast. You have to go to Syracuse. Now, Syracuse hasn't played well the last couple of days or games, but they're fighting for, bowl eligibility. So you get these teams that are fighting for bowl eligibility. Now, would that be Carolina? If I had to say right now, it would be no. And those teams are going to give you your best shot because they want to go to a bowl and it matters more, and they're getting better. From Carolina, we haven't seen any improvement over the first, 5 games.
Yeah, a couple last ones. You mentioned, when we talked a little bit before going on air, that seeing what's happening on the sidelines with the iPads and things like that. How much coaching are you seeing happening, like, during the game? We saw obviously that first double pass, and go. Dabo Swinney said after the game they saw something on film. Looked like they went back to that over and over again with faking that play and then trying to get a guy behind the secondary. It worked sometimes. Obviously, Carolina defended it a couple times too, but it does seem like in-game adjustments. There wasn't the ability to make those kind of in-game adjustments that you need to be able to come back and win a game like that, or at least be competitive.
Yeah, I think for the first time in my career in college, and the NFL is different, right? It's a lot of on the phone, on headsets, and kind of, getting it from the booth. Because, before the iPads, there was somebody in the box that could see it was cover 4 and tell me that I was an idiot and I missed the throw. But now you have the iPads, and in my opinion, Brian, they're almost more of a hindrance, because you lose the verbal communication from player to coach. Now, I didn't see it on Saturday, and for whatever reason, it could have gone on. But I think that's the biggest thing that I see is, when a kid makes a mistake in college, I feel like if you have the iPad, you can check it, show them, and then correct them. And that's a huge, huge upgrade. But then, when I played, there was no iPad, so it was almost, you had to be verbal. And there were heated moments where, hey man, you need to make this throw. And this is why, this is what we saw. You need to run this route. You need to, if you're running a dig, I need you at 12 yards. Hey, you're running a comeback. There was verbal communication from player to player, player to coach, position coach to position coach. And I think the iPad, you can kind of just go like this and avoid, verbal communication. Everything in life is about verbal and communication. Now, I just think I didn't see that on Saturday, but then I look at the other sideline. I think Dabo Swinney, he prides himself on having those. I'm meeting you at the numbers. I'm walking you down. Let's address this right now. There was a penalty, and he got the guy at the numbers, said, "Hey, man, you can't do that." Gave him a slap on the butt, whether it was a, hey, you really, really can't do that. And it was aggressive tone, or was, hey, we got to fix this. He fixed it right there. They moved on, and it was verbal communication. So I think that goes a long way. And I just have not seen that from mistakes that were being made and instant corrections and instant coaching, especially during the games.
I mean, as bad as everything was, it could get worse. Thaddeus Dixon suffered an injury, didn't come back into that game. Like, probably been their best player. Just, I mean, you just worry about a season snowballing. I want to ask you about the fans. You saw that place empty out just as well as everybody else did. The television cameras too. I mean, for fans, for players in the locker room, like, do seasons hit a point of no return? And how close is North Carolina to kind of that point of no return? You're already hearing talk about, we're bringing in 40 high school kids. Well, they don't have 40 guys leaving the program, based on graduation. So that means some of these guys know they're not going to be back. Like, do you just worry about, you reach a point where everybody checks out?
Yeah. And in my personal opinion, saying things like that during the middle of the season, that we're having 40 high school kids come in, really bothers me, because there's guys in the locker room that you recruited. So where are they going to go? And you're saying that in the middle of the season when guys are auditioning for spots and telling them they're basically no good. It's not the coach's fault. It's not the talent evaluation fault. So, Brian, I really have a problem with that. And because if I was a player, I'm thinking, oh, well, these coaches are just going to sell out and they're waiting for next year. And I just think that's a bad representation of these kids in the locker room expecting their effort. You need to coach these kids as hard as you can, because they have a chance to play college football. And you need to give them their best effort. Saying things like that just tells me that, are you giving up? Or as a player, I'm thinking, we've had 3 guys leave the program. So I think sending those messages really bother me sometimes, because as a player, I'm looking at my teammates being like, oh, what the heck, man? They're just thinking that we're no good, or guys are no good. So I just think if it's really going to be hard to, generate some momentum going forward this season. And it's going to have to come from the players, and it's going to have to come from a coaching staff that wants to improve and wants to show like they want to win. And I think for fans and alumni, to answer your question, it's very frustrating. It is very frustrating to see, have this much expectation and to have seen this much of a letdown. And I know a lot of UNC fans out there, and that interlocking NC means a lot to us. And if you give your best effort, whether you win or lose, we will be behind you. But when we see it's an effort level thing and it's a lack of communication type of issue, then it's going to be really, really hard. But I know personally, I'm always going to support the players and support whoever is wearing the NC emblem. But right now, there has to be a wholesale change in the type of mentality that we have going forward on each and every Saturday and Friday night.
Yeah, I know as his former player, it's probably just as tough to watch, your team lose like that. And Belichick at 73, it's probably going to be tough for him to change, right? He's not, he's won a lot of games doing things his way, doing things this way. And if it's not working, I don't know that he's in a position to radically alter the way that he does things, because he's got decades of experience that says, hey, this works. And if it's not working right now, well, it's not a problem with me. Maybe it's a problem with who we got here. Like, you can start to understand why this might be so difficult to get turned around.
Yeah, it's got to be frustrating for him as well. And I'm not saying it's easy to coach. I think it's really, really hard to win games. And I think you're seeing that. It's hard in this landscape of football to win games. I mean, I think that's why Saban got out. He was like, oh, wow, this is tough to compete, because there's constant turnover. You don't know who's going to be, a good player from the transfer portal. You just have no idea. It's pot luck. And you're losing the development part of college sports. And then that's really hard. And I think there has to be some grace and patience. We're 5 games into this. I understand there's no panic level, but the lack of improvement, I think, is just something that I think everyone's concerned with. And even being competitive and just making simple mistakes that are kind of coachable and fixable and teachable. But to go back to Coach Belichick, I think he's given it everything he has. But you're going to hit a stretch now where you got to show improvement and signs that this team's getting better.
All right, we'll switch gears one time and we'll get out of here. But Drake Maye, obviously former North Carolina quarterback, I heard a lot of commentary this morning about how this is a signature performance for him, leading New England into Buffalo to beat the Bills. What did you see? What have you seen out of his play? And do you get a sense that he could be the next or one of the next superstar quarterbacks in this league?
I was so impressed, Brian. I could not stop watching that game. And just knowing Drake and seeing his recruiting process and playing golf with him and being a mentor and a supporter, like you watch that kid's progression. He has everything it takes. I mean, stiff arming the guy in the fourth quarter, throwing it to Diggs and doing that is incredible. And to be a young player on the road in Buffalo, which is an incredibly tough place to play, and winning that game, that kid has a chance to be probably the best quarterback to go to the NFL from North Carolina. And I think that he embodies what it means to be a leader. I think he embodies everything it means to be a football player and just a great teammate. You can tell it means a lot to him to play football, and he did that for us. And he really put the team on his back when he was at Carolina and with lesser talent as well. And you're looking for more guys like that. It goes back to even this team. You see guys like Drake that did it every single Saturday to give us a chance to win. Then he goes and does it on Sundays, and I know he's an exceptional player, but you want more guys like that. You want more guys that have that energy and have that fire. But what he did last night was incredible. And, it's hard to win in the NFL, especially on the road, and he's going to have to keep doing it. So he's got a long road ahead. But what we're seeing now is something special.
Well, who's at the top of that list right now? Best quarterback from North Carolina to play in the NFL?
Well, I mean, you got to think about it. So I would probably put Drake just because he's kind of starting his career. But TJ Yates had a really good year, 7 years, and won a playoff game on the road in Cincinnati. I remember that was a wild card game and came in, started, and now he's the quarterback coach, receiver coach, and doing a lot of different roles for the Falcons. I mean, you look at a guy like Ronald Curry. He didn't play quarterback in the NFL, but I mean, what an illustrious career coming from the quarterback room at Carolina. And then look at what Darian Durant did in the CFL as far as winning Grey Cups and things like that. So there's a long list. I mean, Mitch Trubisky got drafted. I mean, Sam Howell's still a backup in the league and getting reps. There's guys in the NFL with a lot of talent coming from Carolina. You look at a guy like Mac Hollins last night. He's the starting receiver for the Patriots and the Carolina community. And so there's a lot of guys that have played at Carolina, had really good success, but I think Drake's going to be at the top of the list by the time his career is done.
I think it was a couple of weeks ago, Mac Hollins scored, Tez Walker scored, Javonte Williams scored, Drake had a touchdown, and Javonte, I mentioned Javonte, but you get a sense of how much talent has come through the program, and then you look, in those Mac 2.0 years, and even a little before, and then you look at the talent on this team, and you say, where are the NFL guys necessarily on this team? And again, I'm not trashing the guys on this team, but you just don't necessarily see that same level of talent that's on this team that you're seeing on Sunday.
Yeah, I think it's very fair. I think that's a very, very fair comment, Brian. I think you had guys that were very, very talented. I mean, the fact that Tez Walker is making plays in the NFL is what we were hoping to see. And with the
I didn't even mention Amari Hampton.
Yeah, Amari Hampton is number 7 overall pick or 8, and he's playing really well in LA. And there's been every time you turn on the TV, you're like, oh, he's from Carolina. You're like, it's just that talent has been here. And, I understand it takes time and there's a different landscape in college football, but there's guys that played here that we were, it was a joy to watch play because of their talent level and also competitiveness. And we got to go find more guys like that. And, those guys in the locker room got to step up and look at those guys and say, hey, I want to be one of those guys that can go make plays.
Well, he's Bryn Renner. I'm Brian Murphy. Thanks so much for listening in. And we won't be here next week because bye week for North Carolina, but be back every week after that for the rest of the season. Thanks so much for listening, Bryn. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks, Brian.